Probably, it's quite possible. What I will say though is that's not the only way of doing long range planning. That's not the only way of scaling planning. At the end of the day, a lot of these conversations are less about practices and more about organizational mechanics like work stream optimization, right? Or reorganization of teams around the work that you're doing, right? The batch size, how you're cutting them, the self-containment of teams, the self-containment of architecture patterns, the modularization strategies of your database. A lot of that stuff is your work stream optimization and really portfolio management or your actual work management, and less about practices of, whether it's agile or waterfall or whatever that might be. A lot of those things will help you put a nice little planning wrapper around it, a nice little execution wrapper around it, and will keep you disciplined on those things. But that's not the key to focus on. I'd say what you want to focus on is stating the problem well, understanding the moving parts, understanding the nature of variability between scope, cost, and time. What are you trying to do? How long do you intend to do it? How much resource do you intend to expend for it? And how much do you know about those things? Because that is what is going to drive the economics of a lot of decision making when it comes to people, process, technology, infrastructure, funding, auditing, deployment, those kinds of procedures. A lot of this depends on to what degree you can see out into the future. So again, going back to the planned versus unplanned, right? Now, if you can say 6 sprints down the road or 6 weeks down the road or 6 months down the road, the nature of the work is static, it lends itself well to us sequentially approaching this. Sure. Okay. Probably waterfall is the right way for that kind of thing. Like anything that is well understood, a standard operating procedure, something that doesn't have uncertainty around it, something that doesn't have too much variability around it, and for the most part can be lined up exactly the way it's going to be executed. Absolutely. Yeah. Use waterfall for that stuff. Majority of the business problems out there, they tend to be the other way though. They tend to be unplannable beyond a certain degree. They tend to have uncertainty. They tend to have, unplanned work popping up at the last minute. The line of sight tends to be limited. People change their mind a lot. So to deal with that uncertainty, you're going to cut the batch size to a small, reasonable time frame that is small enough to be, I guess, logical where you can get feedback on it. And at the same time, it is large enough that it can still provide some value holistically to your users. Now you have to figure out what that time frame looks like, or what that right balance of complexity and volume of work together looks like. Right? So that's the $1 million question. You get that solved and then you become predictable. And from there on, everything becomes just easy, or a walk in the park, as they say. Velocity dropping or increasing might be too situational to answer without looking at the data. Here's what I mean by that. When you're looking at velocity, it's never a point in time data. Velocity is generally meant to be a trend analysis, which means you want to see it over the course of a few sprints or a course of a few months or a course of a few time windows. The reason why you're doing that is because velocity essentially represents the rate of completion of work. Velocity is not the same as speed. Like if you go back to high school physics, right? Speed is going to be a combination of the actual rate at which you're doing it versus the amount of effort that you need to deliver on that. So velocity divided by capacity is your speed. Velocity is just the numerator there. Velocity is the rate of completion of work. So you want to see if the velocity over the course of a few sprints is within a certain control limit. So you're more concerned with the variation of velocity as much as, or not so much around the actual number of velocity, because you might be doing 100 in one sprint, 80 things in the next one, 75 in the next one. But as long as you're within that control limit of 25% or so margin, you're still predictable to a large degree. Now, to your point though, if your velocity is like a sinusoidal wave, where you have like 100 in one, then 250 in one more, then 5 in one more, okay, that means something is going on. We don't know exactly if it's a bad thing or not, but something is going on. Some of the things that might be going on, one could be that you just don't have a standardized way of decomposing your work. So your batch sizes tend to be a little weird. Sometimes you break them down into large things. Sometimes it's very small. That speaks to the nature of your work to a certain degree. It also speaks to the experience level or the skill level of the teams, of how they break things down, how they assess the complexity and volume. It might also just be the way you're doing your work. Maybe you're integrating too late. Maybe you're synchronizing too late. It could be any of those things. Either ways, it warrants a deeper conversation, I'd say, as a team to think about. What you don't want is you don't want this sinusoidal wave of doing a lot, then doing not too much, then again a lot, then not enough. You want some sort of a trend, right? At the plateau that says, this team is generally between like 100 or 75 things. Sometimes they do 75, sometimes they do 85, 95, 100, but they stay within the 75 to 100 margin. That 75 to 100 can be number of things, it can be points, it can be t-shirt sizes, it can be whatever the heck you want it to be. I'm not concerned about that. What I'm more concerned about is the variance within a certain window. But if your velocity is dropping consistently, it could also mean that maybe the team is getting better at estimating. So maybe now what they thought you should take them like 25 points is only about 15 points now. They're just getting really good at stuff. So they're estimating everything smaller, right? That's also a possibility. So I would say it warrants a deeper conversation and not so much as a reaction, which I don't think you're suggesting either. But the things that I just mentioned are some things that you want to talk about in your retrospective. Like, why is it that our numbers are going down? Are we really getting good at this stuff? Are we able to just prioritize them and estimate them better? Or is something generally going on? Like, is our throughput suffering? So I would focus more around the variation of throughput and velocity and not so much about the numbers, actually.